going to talk about storytelling. And I am the CEO of Binary Bubbles. And my company is building a content management system called Cortex Core. And that actually puts the focus on storytellers to drive an experience with characters in AR and VR and beyond. So I'm an English major who has spent like the last 25 years in games and game technology, as well as R&D. So I'm going to talk about the role of storytelling and what it's already played, what it should play, and how we're going to continue to sort of evolve in that space in AR, VR, and XR. So let's first look at how our own biases determine what we think is a good story. This is Stephen Wiltshire. He can take a 10-minute helicopter ride and then go home and draw everything that he saw. Now, there's not a whole lot of you here, but as a special treat, I'm going to show everyone in this room how to do what Stephen Wiltshire did. Okay? Everyone ready? Here we go. All right. So you're all probably a little disappointed, but I don't know why, because it's the same data, right? It took I'm going to just guarantee that it took a lot more collective effort to make this camera than it took Stephen Wiltshire's parents to make him. So why is it that his slide is so much more compelling and this slide is essentially a sales brochure? It is because we are biased towards human beings. A lot of people are talking about this. I love the talk before me where she talked about that. His story is very personal, and the sharing of personal stories is the fastest way that we build empathy among each other. So basically, we're biased towards human beings because we want to connect with other human beings. So most of the time, bias is bad. But when it comes to designing effective communication, bias is awesome. Because without it, right, we get this. This is basically every bad outcome, from every science fiction movie, every book you've ever sort of read. So on that super upbeat note, let's talk more about how storytelling and game design have always been a part of tech development and what lessons we should actually be paying attention to. So, now, storytellers have always told us where we're going to go and where we're headed. And a large section of actually game design has evolved into a subset of storytelling. So it's kind of augmenting this ancient human activity. And apocalyptic predictions aside, it's not news that science fiction stories have always heavily influenced at least the design of technology. Everyone still talks about Minority Report and Iron Man, and they're still seen as sort of visionary for aspirational augmented reality experiences. So it kind of lets us imagine how we should be interacting with our technology in our everyday life. And we can get a lot of the surface details wrong, but we do get a lot right. So beyond just focusing on the fact that this is an interesting design template for technology, I think we should also pay attention to the point of all of these stories, because they all say the same thing and they all have the same warning. We can't forget about the fact that we're human. You should value empathy over efficiency. You should value your own humanity, and you should respect the chaos that is being human, because as inspiring as any future technology is in this story, it's always like supplemental to the human beings who use that technology. The truth of how we struggle to be good people, at least I hope we struggle to be good people, our desire to connect, there's really no expiration date on that. And that's really different from like my floppy disk, my zip drive, and that SSD that I just bought like 2 years ago. A good story really holds up. Our data needs change. Our emotional needs really don't change. We want to be understood. We want to feel heard. We want to feel relevant. And the technology kind of only becomes a story when it becomes sort of better at being human than we are. So in Spike Jonze' Her, and this is a spoiler alert, but the movie came out a long time ago, the AI actually develops sympathy and empathy and curiosity. And it eventually just decides to leave the humans behind because of that, because the humans aren't interested in evolving in that direction. And in the Westworld, the game designers use robots, to sort of populate, instead of a virtual space, to create this sort of consequence-free experience. So no spoilers for that, but it doesn't really look like that's working out for anyone if you've been watching. So let's sort of talk about how game design and modern storytelling sort of influence each other and how it defines where we are today, and again, very importantly, where it might predict where we're headed. I don't know how many of you guys are gamers, but in games, the people that you meet are either driven by AI or they're driven by other players. And when we meet characters that we know aren't real, our behavior is usually really, really bad. So Grand Theft Auto is the poster child for bad gaming behavior. Oh, sorry. Grand Theft Auto is the poster child for bad gaming behavior, because you can steal, murder, and beat up other characters with little or no consequence. But I'm going to say that that's not actually worse than The Sims, which is considered, E for everyone. Actually, so what I did was I looked up terrible things that you can do to your Sims. This is one of the more acceptable ones. And it says, one time I killed a Sim by drowning, and then I made everyone show up to his funeral in swimwear. So that was pretty shitty. One way to interpret our inhumanity to AI characters is that since we know they can't actually be hurt, we don't have to care about them. But flip that, we also know they don't care about us, right? In fact, that's why we're so much more frustrated when we talk to a chat bot during a service call. You don't expect an AI character to care about you, so it doesn't really hurt your feelings when it doesn't, yet. But one of the most hurtful experiences about being human is finding out that your affections are not returned. And that's actually the plot of a whole other, bunch of books, TVs, and movies. So the reason why the Sims example is funny and also kind of appalling is that the Sims themselves don't really have a story, right? They only have a story that you make up for them. But this is what interesting thing happens is when you project stories onto, unimportant characters, you actually start to care. In fact, one of the creators of Westworld, Lisa Joy, specifically references this phenomenon and how it influenced how she wrote the show. So she said, when she played Grand Theft Auto, it's hard for me to run over a lady because I'm like, does she limp home to her family when you turn it off? Do they have health insurance? Probably not. So, for her, the game didn't change, but she imagined an inner life with the characters, and that made every interaction she had sort of morally problematic, right? And of course, we still behave terribly in games when we know a character is driven by a real person, but there's a different emotional depth to that experience. Esports shows that it's way more fun to win against real people because that the other guy cares about winning. But we have seen time and time again that not being able to see someone react kind of makes everyone a little bit more of a jerk. So what does it mean in AR and VR, and XR moving forward? Because these technologies are ones that we actually incorporate into our actual reality, or it takes over our reality altogether. So, before we go forward, let's take a quick overview of, let's go back. Let's take a quick overview of how digital communications have, changed us already. So, knowing your meme is a vital part of understanding present-day culture. It's kind of a shorthand to let you figure out what community that you actually belong to. Autocorrect, we accept miscommunication as part of our digital conversation now. And, acronyms and emoticons, it's for the typographical nuance because we don't type conversation the way that novels are written. And I always like doing that, I say pedantically. So while fiction might not have gotten specific details of how communications are going to evolve, they did actually get the emotional gist correct, and the negative social impact, unfortunately. So, give me a second. Everyone does feel that they can now potentially be a celebrity. And we do just kind of celebrate being famous without really caring as much about famous for what, which is what Natural Born Killers was, pretty upset about. I think social bullying has become weaponized. And while the need for validation is a major part of growing up, it now requires like a maintenance of a digital persona. So before you just kind of needed your friends to like you. We're still working out how to manage that. How to manage our digital communities and our play experience. Riot Games actually had an entire department to try and figure out how to manage their community so that the loudest, most obnoxious voices in the room didn't turn off entire groups of people from playing. And there are many virtual spaces that women and minorities, by and large, have decided they just won't go to, and I do think that obviously skews the numbers of the actual audience, because digital spaces aren't these consequence-free spaces anymore. They're real, and if one of the places where most people play behave normally, like Target, and the other place was like this. I think most of us would choose to go to Target, I hope. And all of this I expect to be sort of magnified when you get to sort of VR and AR, because the technology is so much more visceral. And our avatars can be progressively more expressive than sort of a static image, which is what you get in Twitter and Facebook. And I expect that to be a consequently greater impact on both sides of a conversation. Because we experience this now, right? We don't actually have to have perfect graphical representation to care about a character. We're fine with symbolic representation. And a Pixar film doesn't lose its emotional impact by being animated. So if everyone in VR still stays a cartoon, we're still going to care as long as the emotional experience of them feels real. And while we use, emoticons and acronyms to express ourselves, in our tone when communicating through text, in real life we figure this out, by looking at how someone's behaving, usually by focusing on their eyes and their hands. And not surprisingly, Google and Facebook have both bought companies where the focus is on eye tracking. And this technology, you're seeing this at the conference now, it's rapidly evolving. I think this slide is already outdated. The current state of technology is going to make this even easier. So it already allows for real-time capture of your face with the camera. You can express yourself digitally, and it's going to just get better. So your VR and AR avatar will probably just be you projected into someone else's virtual space. I'm going to say that we're going to try and make ourselves better looking, because I think we're still all going to be super vain. But what does this mean when the virtual you reacts with other virtual people mixed in with these non-player characters, and those characters have reasonable facsimiles of what real emotions? Well, we actually already know that performing an action has positive and negative effects on your mental health. That there's an adage that says smile and you'll feel better. That's actually true. And the inverse is also true, by the way. So, if you can't smile, you'll also feel better. So Botox for everyone. So the things that you say and act out in a virtual space will have an impact on your psyche, and a greater impact on all of those around you, because they can see you. And since we don't live our lives in silos, your behavior in VR will definitely influence how people feel about you in real life. Because current digital communications, really heralded fantastic breakthroughs in how you can bully people. That's essentially bullying 2.0, right? And so let's look about what 3.0 is going to look like. I'm frankly a little terrified. And I think, we're already clearly dealing with the challenges that current digital communication brings, right? Our laws are catching up with cyberbullying, doxing, voyeurism, and it's all enabled by this, wonderful tech that we've built, data theft, data ransoming, the list goes on. The common apology for like a really crappy, Twitter or Facebook post is often, oh, that's not really who I am. But we all know that doesn't hold the water anymore. And for many harassers, the interface of the interaction makes things feel less real because you can't see the person. And so it's easy to forget that it's actually a person on the other end of the digital communication channel that you have. So if you can't feel and see that your words and actions are having an impact, that person may as well be Siri. And we all know that we're not very nice as Siri. But since all of your future digital persona will be more expressive than any system that is reliant on text, you're going to hope that people will be more polite, right? Maybe. But unfortunately, we're kind of going in another direction as well with actual reality, right? The prevalence of reality TV means that the current society can be all too ready to believe that actual reality has no consequences. So this happened last year. The blurring of what's real and what isn't is already a problem. So this happened last year, and the killer actually thought she was participating in a reality show. So my guess is that our understanding of behavior and consequences of that behavior is probably not going to trend positively in VR or AR. We think behavior matters less and less, and in parallel, the tech is getting better at making us question actual reality. So how do we get ahead of that? Well, in the case of Westworld, I said look at fiction, see what they're telling us. The premise is that if something looks and behaves exactly like a real human, at what point does pretending to be a cruel person means you're just a cruel person? Right? And in the same vein, Rachel Winters at Slate.com said she started judging people by how rudely they spoke to their digital assistants. She said, it matters how you interact with your virtual assistant, not because it has feelings or will one day murder you in your sleep for disrespecting it, but because of how it reflects on you. Who are you when you're in a position of power, and how do you treat those beneath you? So, how do we fix this, right? Do we automate, maintaining civility in our digital communities by using, let's say, maybe chatbots? We can use that as a first line of defense, and think of them as replaceable fake humans that don't have, feelings to be hurt. Well, no, they're not really built for that, and they won't be unless, you log into a chatbot and it just refuses to help you when you're mean to it. And you can't obviously rely on the community itself to teach chatbots how to behave, because we tried that, and fiction also says that's not going to really work out for us. The actual answer is there's no shortcuts, right? If you're a designer, if you're a storyteller, you have to do the work. You need to be proactive about what you want your digital community to be. You can't defer responsibility of that technology to the community. You have to make more moral judgment calls. And there are some bright spots. Quiver took responsibility for their community. When a player was virtually groped and harassed, the game designers did not brush off the experience. They actually redesigned the experience, deciding that they would not let trolls dominate their space. And most of the major tech companies are, proactively, working on adding different voices and teaching the AI how to think. And this is the right path, right? Because the core of empathy is understanding the world from someone else's point of view. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm wrapping up. So, we have a responsibility to create stories and communities that connect us with each other, and rather than using it to further alienate and isolate us from the repercussions of our actions and words. Knowing that we are all connected should make us kinder, not meaner. And in AR and VR by large, it shouldn't be like this no-holds-barred, dystopian wonderland that everyone says it's, science fiction has said it's going to be. Because we tried that, and we're basically here. So, we act on our worst impulses with anonymity, and the excuse is this is a safe-spaced event. But we didn't disperse negativity by doing that. We actually weaponized it, and we validated and empowered it. So we do have a responsibility to create stories and communities that connect us to one another, rather than further alienate and isolate us from what we do and say. So in this virtual world, rather than make our virtual places, a place without consequence, we should actually use all the lessons that we've already learned in the real world and what fiction has said, and try and make this, digital world one where everyone feels welcome. Because, the best playground isn't the one that has the most expensive slide. It's the one where everyone is welcome and everyone gets to play. Thank you.